Welcome to Meet Me in the Penthouse. I am Amy, along here with my sister Molly. We help high-achieving women increase their income, but most importantly, their impact. We are neighbors, sisters, and business partners. We have built 8-figure businesses together, traveled the world together, raised our children together, mentored thousands of men and women together, and it's all because we have a penthouse mindset. We aim for the top, and we show others how to empower themselves to peel back the layers and truly step into their greatness and calling. Welcome to Meet Me in the Penthouse. Welcome to Meet Me in the Penthouse. My name is Amy Mosser. My sister Molly and I are typically on this together. We are on the Sisters podcast. We have a Sisters Next Door coaching program. We started this podcast because we have a coaching business that helps high-achieving women not only increase their income, but most importantly, their impact. And as we've heard from so many of you loyal listeners, you wanted a little bit more of our stories. And so Molly and I are going to intermittently share a little bit about our stories, our journey to where we are today. So sit back and enjoy. It's just Molly and I, or it's just myself, not Molly and I. There'll be no bickering, no laughing. Well, I might laugh because I laugh at myself. So anyway, one of the things I really wanted to share is, as Ed Milet said in one of his podcasts, and I just loved it so much, you're most powerfully positioned to help the person you once were. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about turning your trials into triumphs. And I have such a passion in my heart for helping women get out of the back row, rise up, find their voice, and truly walk in their greatness. As I am leading the women's division with Cleona O'Hara with the Napoleon Hill Institute, we have such a passion. And one of our missions is to make 1 million women millionaires. And the reason that we are so passionate about making women millionaires is because women put their money back in the economy. They recirculate it. They use it to serve and bless and help others. We use it to educate our children. We use it to help other women who were once in the position or are in the position that we once were. We circulate it. We invest it. We invest in real estate. We are savvy business people. So we are so passionate about, like I said, encouraging women, empowering women to get out of the back row. How many of you are sitting in the back row? Rise up, use your voice, and truly walk in your greatness. My journey starts many, many years ago. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And looking back, I always made bold decisions. I have been someone I've always loved fashion. I've always loved decorating. I would redecorate my room. I would rather redecorate my room and try on fun clothing and sit at the sewing machine than go out to a party. I have always been someone who worked hours and hours at a job. I worked full-time in high school, even when I was a cheerleader. I've always worked a couple of jobs while I was in college. And then I have been an entrepreneur since I was 22 years old. So I've always been a 1099 employee. Never known where my next paycheck is coming from. That's all I know. 30 years. Can you believe that? I know some people think, oh my gosh, that gives me a stomach ache. Like my husband, who is in the administration for the public schools here in Nebraska. He has never not had a steady paycheck. I have never known where my next paycheck comes from. And I have always lived in faith. I serve a big God who I don't doubt will ever continue to bless me. Like it just does not even cross my mind. And so when I was 22 and I was newly married, my then husband and I bought golf stores. So we were able to buy some golf stores right when the Tiger Woods craze was starting. And oh my goodness, we had so much fun. In fact, we worked 7 days a week. When I had my daughter, we went directly from the hospital with a stage 4 tear to the golf store to stand and work, to the retail golf store. We brought the baby and I was hobbling a little bit and wearing, the white net underwear still. But that has always been my work ethic. I have always worked really hard, but I was so relational. And our golf store clients were the ones that when I decided, when we sold the golf stores, and then husband said, you need to get a job, I needed to step in and start supporting the family. So I got my real estate license 20 years ago. I had 2 young children. And so I took the real estate exam. I got it all done in 3 weeks, and I literally jumped in with both feet. And right after I started real estate, I was talking to my husband at the time on the phone, and he said, oh my gosh, Charlie, I was out showing houses, and he said, Charlie, oh my gosh, he's dying. And through the phone, and I had no idea where they were. This was back before you could find my iPhone and all of that. But I soon found out through 911, I had to call and say, did somebody call about something happening with a 2-year-old? And my son began to have several hundred seizures a day. So we were in and out of hospitals. We were life flighted. We were just all over to several different states. And I remember thinking, I'm losing my son. He was perfectly normal. He was developing at a normal range, but his teachers at school said he's just been falling down. He'll just all of a sudden lose all bodily control and he'll just fall. So I began to connect the dots. And like I said, as a teenager, I made bold decisions. I really walked on my own. And when I realized there was something wrong with my child, and all of our friends were physicians, we were really in the best hands, I knew that I needed to do something. And so this is when I've always had a strong faith, but I hopped online and I found a hospital in Minnesota. We're in Nebraska. And I said, they treated it was a pediatric epileptologist, and I knew I needed to get my son in there. But all of these doctors were months and months in waiting. So I dialed a number, and I got someone that said nurse's station. And I said, I need to make an appointment for my child. He's having seizures nonstop. We're on 5 pharmaceutical anticonvulsant meds. And she said, well, you reached the nurse's station. And I just began to sob. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, I'm losing my child. What do I do? I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. And I said, do you have children? And she said, yes. And I said, what would you do if you were me? And she said, there's 1 hospital bed left. So this was a small unit. And she said, drive him in through the emergency room. And so I put Charlie in the car and I drove him up. I began to drive him up to Minnesota. He began to have so many seizures that I needed to call the airline and fly him up in Omaha. And so as I was calling the airline, I was giving them my credit cards that were maxed out, and I could not get an airline ticket. But God again showed up, and the gal on the other end said, I have frequent flyer miles, Northwest Airlines. And she gave me a free ticket that I could fly Charlie on my lap, having seizures, up to Minnesota to get in through the emergency room. And when I finally got up to Minnesota, again, a bold move I made. There was no referral. People were thinking I was a little crazy. He just had seizures. We could just get him on the meds. I walked into the epilepsy ward, the pediatric epilepsy ward, and all of these children had helmets. They had all those little EEG wires on. Many of them were in wheelchairs. Many of them were wearing bibs. They were like teenagers, but maybe more like a 2-year-old, right? Some were tube fed. Most all of them were nonverbal. And I remember walking in and I said to the nurse, I had now put together the pieces that that God was in all of this. And I said to the nurse, what's wrong with these children? My son has epilepsy and seizures. I just need to find out what's going on with him. And she said, oh, don't worry. These children all have Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. It's a really, really terrible diagnosis, but we'll figure out what's wrong with Charlie. They had told me to plan to be there for 2 weeks, and within 24 hours, they gave me a diagnosis of Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. They told me to plan on him being a 2-year-old, him being diapered, him being in a wheelchair, him being nonverbal. Medication would not work. It's a medication-resistant form of epilepsy. So you would be on different medications. They would work for a while, and then you would start to have several breakthrough seizures a day. And so I remember getting that diagnosis, and I truly had a nervous breakdown. I crawled on my hands and knees on the cold tile to the end of the hallway. And when I looked up from my hands and knees, there was a cross on top of a church across the street, and it was lit. And I had my first real spiritual experience. my inner voice, God said, stand up, your child's going to be a miracle. So I walked back into that room where the doctor was, where I had just crawled out having a nervous breakdown. And I said, my child is going to be a miracle. My child is going to be the 1%. You will see him graduate from high school. You will see him play baseball. And he said, I've waited my entire career for something like this. If anybody can do it, Charlie can. So that is where my why came in. I went back to Nebraska and God showed up so big. He continued to show up big. We ended up getting in with the right therapist. We had therapy twice a day. We ended up getting all of the help that we could. We had a respite care. I hired a respite care nurse for 3 years with him. I began to teach him to relearn to do everything. And his seizures slowed and eventually they stopped. And I weaned him off all of his medication about 3 years into the process. Charlie today is 22 years old. He's the only one of record that is seizure-free, medication-free, and disability-free. His MRIs cleared up. The lesions on his brain cleared up. I've had so many people say, what did you do? What did you do? Like, what was it? I pictured him as healed before he was healed. I stepped out in faith with everything I did. I knew that if I could believe it in my mind, if I could see it in my dreams, if I could see it in my mind, I could hold it in my hand, it would become reality. If I believed through the grace of God that Charlie was going to be healed, he could be. So began my journey of switching my mindset and only believing and seeing and speaking life over Charlie. Along with that began my transformation, even as a human being. I knew, like I know now, that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. So I jumped into a real estate career full on. I have always been a top producer because I have not given myself any other option. I've always been a present mom. I have always been someone that gives and serves and tithes. Like, it is that mindset that I, in 2005, chose to adopt, and it has changed the trajectory of my life. I have walked away 10 years ago from a marriage with nothing but a large house on a gorgeous lot with a pool and a large mortgage. But I knew that God would replenish. I knew my children needed to see a woman who could walk in faith, who could believe in herself, who knew she was worthy, who did not need anybody but God to take care of her. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done. We lived a beautiful life, but it wasn't true to who I was. And the way that my children were being raised was not the way that I would have raised them, the way that I raised them alone. And I knew I needed to take a step in order for my children to live the life they deserved in freedom. And so 10 years ago, I walked away from everything, the gorgeous life that we had, the country club life, the gym, all of the investment properties. I gave that all to him. And God spoke to me and said, I will replenish. And he said, increase your tithing. I increased my giving, even though I thought, I don't even know, I'm 100% commission. How am I make my next check? The more I gave, the more he continued to give. I also started a team of women. It was a team of women that were going through exactly what I had gone through. Like I mentioned, you're most powerfully positioned to help the woman, the people, the person that you once were. And so I found my friends that were going through divorces, that maybe hadn't been in the workforce, that, were walking through challenges, that had lost their jobs, even if they were in a marriage. And I said, here, follow me. I will take you. Let me hold my hand. I felt like I was at the top of the mountain. I was so empowered. I didn't know the how, but I was walking in the faith because God had truly guided me and said, I will give you the strength. And I had no doubt that he would not continue to provide. So as I continued to walk forward with a complete I built a social selling business to the top 5%. I was at the top 1% of my real estate company for years and years, and God just continued to bless me. I also fell madly in love with an amazing human being. I met him at my daughter's basketball. She was cheering for basketball in high school. His son was playing for the opposite team. Met in the popcorn line, and I am madly in love with my husband. But it's because I stepped out in faith. It's because I was willing to give up everything. I was willing to give up the beautiful life. I was willing to give up the money, all of the millions of dollars, because I knew that I needed to walk in my greatness. I needed to rise up and use my voice. My voice, I had shrunk back. I had merged into a life that I hadn't intended to. And I knew that I needed to teach my children, particularly my daughter, how a woman was supposed to be treated. And I chose to rise up and step out in faith. And so as I started out in 2021, our team did $77 million, which in Nebraska is a team of ladies who are raising families and, PTO parents and room mothers and all of the things. I remember getting the gold plate at the awards. And I mean, my goodness, we had worked and worked and worked, and I was attached to my phone, and it was a crazy time. And God bless my husband and my children. They just let me continue to thrive and be crazy successful. And it was the overflow of abundance was truly what I was in. But when my friend and broker, when I broke down and I said, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of being on the phone all the time. I need to catch my breath. She said, what do you really want? And that was the first time anybody had asked me what I really wanted. Nobody had ever said, what do you really want? Ladies, do you ever feel like if I were to ask you, what do you really want? Would you know? Yeah, that's the problem. We don't know. We've merged into our husband's life, our children's life, whatever the life that maybe our parents wanted us to be, the career that we're in that maybe wasn't chosen for us, that like we felt like we needed to go into. But what do you really want? Think about that. And when my friend and broker, Julie, said, what do you really want? It made me sob. And I said, I want to be home with my husband. I'm madly in love with my life, madly in love with my husband. And so I went online and I found Cleanna O'Hara, and that is where I started. She was online on Instagram. I took a self-confidence camp. Outwardly, I looked confident. I have always been successful. I've always been the best dressed. I've always driven my white Mercedes and lived in, a $2+ million home. But I was so miserable because I was working so doggone hard that the people that were most important to me were getting the least of me. And I knew I needed to find some balance in that. And so when I took the self-discipline camp, what it did is it really helped me peel back the layers of what I really wanted. And so fast forward now, as Molly and I have started a podcast, my book will be coming out. We have a Sisters Next Door coaching. I'm also leading the women's division in the Napoleon Hill Institute with Cleanna. I know, I am walking in my greatness. I was put on this earth to empower women to get out of the back row. And I'll tell you what, nobody would have thought I was in the back row. But let me tell you, when it came to the awards banquet, I felt unworthy. And I would sit in the back row and I would sit a little I feel unworthy to be selling this much and to be making, this great living. Like there was this unworthiness in me because I let others' opinions, right? Well, how does Amy? She's lucky. She does this. It's because she's pretty, whatever. I let the criticism from others impact me. And I will tell you what, you will never be criticized by somebody doing more than you, only by somebody doing less. When you're out in front, you're going to get kicked from behind. I have been kicked from behind. I have been knocked down, but I have risen and my children have seen me rise. And I know that God has placed me on this earth to carry and encourage and walk hand in hand, be a sister to women who know their calling. I help you peel back the layers, find that calling, rise up and walk in your greatness. And so I have turned trials into my triumphs. I know that everything has happened for me. And by the way, I'm so grateful to my former husband. We had some really incredible memories. I know everything happened for me. I had to choose to use my voice. It's not about him. It was about me. I own that. I own that what I allowed. And when I set a boundary and chose to allow different things and use my voice, my life changed. So it's not about him. It is about me. And I am eternally grateful for all of the opportunities beyond the beautiful children that we have together that have the greatest things about him and the best about me in their bloodline. They're just wonderful human beings. And I don't share this because I want anybody to feel sorry for me. I want you to know that through all of the beautiful fashion that I love, I always tell my husband, he doesn't ever complain because I have been blessed in being able to make a great living. I say, it's my brand. My clothing is my brand. I was raised by a woman who always had, my mom still at 80 has fabulous clothes. I still buy things for her. And my daughter is just fashionista. Like it's our brand. I love it. But beyond the beautiful clothes, beyond the monetary success and the lovely homes and all of that, there were trials, and I don't like to talk about them because I don't dwell on them, and I know they happened for me, and I'm so grateful. I would not be where I am had I not walked through Charlie being sick and having to God heal him, and I had to assert my voice there, and then leaving a marriage that was not healthy for either one of us or my children. That happened, and it happened for me so I could get to where I am. So as I know that I will be speaking on stages, and I know this where I am, and we're going to continue to grow in everything that we do, I want you to know that life will not always go as it's planned, but it is always happening for you. You need to get to a place where you are able to say, I surrender, I forgive, and I want to get into a community like Sisters Next Door, like the Napoleon Hill Institute. Find a community, find a church, whatever. You need to surround yourself with people that are rising up, that will help you as you get out of the back row. And that is exactly what we will do. So in closing, I wanted to share just a little bit about who I am, about my passion, about why I was put on this earth. And I also want you to know we would love to walk beside you. So as you continue to listen to Sisters Next Door, please look us up, add us on Facebook, Molly Croker, Amy Mosser, Meet Me in the Penthouse. My book will be coming out. I keep changing the doggone title. It was originally Meet Me in the Penthouse, but it will be coming up and I will announce it I'm just about finished with it. And it has been such a healing process. But expect these little snippets from Molly and I together individually, and just know that you were put on this earth to do great things. It is no coincidence you're listening to this podcast, you're seeing this video, and it is time for you to step out in faith, find your voice, rise up, and walk in your calling. Have an amazing day, and meet me in the Penthouse. Thank you for tuning in today for Meet Me in the Penthouse with Sisters Amy and Molly. Please rate and review. We love those 5-star ratings and would love to have you go to our website at sistersnextdoor.com.